Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council meeting on Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. We are now live on YouTube. We welcome all those attending in person and everyone tuning in on the live stream. I will start with a roll call of council. I, Councillor Burgess, am present and chairing this meeting. Mayor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant.
Present.
And Councillor Schwinn.
Present.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge the land on which we live has been here from time immemorial, and that Indigenous people have lived here from time immemorial. I thank the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people who have lived here and cared for this land and who continue to share and steward this land with us. May we together learn to care for each other, our flora and fauna, and the land that sustains us. Now for a moment of silence. Council would like to acknowledge the community mural reveal event that happened this past Friday. The vibrant piece crafted during the second annual Multicultural Festival of Elmira celebrates diversity, inclusion, and the beauty of our community in this rural township. We appreciate the efforts of Hope founder Abby Cooper and the mural's lead artist, Alana Decker, for making this initiative a reality. Also, Local Government Week is taking place this week from October 20th to October 26th. Mayor Shantz and councillors have been visiting local grade 5 classes to talk about what the township does and the importance of local government. Please join me now in a moment of silence as council reflects on the commitment to celebrating diversity and the importance of council's role in local government. Let's take a moment. Great, thank you. All right, moving on, do we have any disclosures of pecuniary interest from anyone on council? Seeing none, we have no items to come forward from closed session. Our first item here is our adoption of the minutes. We have a resolution for the following minutes to be adopted from the Committee of the Whole on October 8th and the Special Council also on October 8th. Someone like to move those? Councillor Schwinn, seconded by Councillor Bryant. All those in favor? And that's carried. All right, we have no public meetings today, but we do have 3 presentations. First up, we would welcome Patrick Gilbride, Executive Director, and Rebecca Robinson, Director of Climate Adaptations Program of Reep Green Solutions. Please go ahead when you are ready. You can step up to the front there and press the mic button there to talk.
Thanks very much. I'm solo tonight. Rebecca, my colleague, was sick, so she wasn't able to make it. So. Okay. Good evening, Chair Burgess, Mayor Shantz, councillors, and staff. We're pleased to be here this evening to share with you our most recent impact report and a few of the stories of that impact from Woolwich and Waterloo Region residents. First off, we want to acknowledge our co-founder, University of Waterloo's Paul Parker, pictured there on the left, who retired from our board after, this is our 25th year, so after 24 years, and Mary Jane Patterson, who served as our executive director for 22 years. But as you can see on the right, they've left with us a very strong foundation of a passionate team of volunteers and staff who really work on our mission every day to provide the community with the practical tools and knowledge to make sustainable living the norm. Back in 2020, we set a target of empowering people to make 10,000 meaningful actions by the year 2030. This report marks our 3rd year of tracking those actions, and as you can see, people in our community are hungry for climate change solutions. 2,000 of those actions were recorded over the past year, which marks an acceleration of interest in everything from installing heat pumps to flood-proofing entire neighborhoods. With the wind down of the Greener Homes program from the federal government, we're in jeopardy of losing this important momentum. But tonight, I'd like to just focus on a few of the stories from some of the people impacted by our work. People like Corrine. Corrine needed to replace her exterior doors and windows of her home. So after an energy evaluation from Reep, her advisor highlighted several additional opportunities to further improve her 70-year-old home's energy efficiency. Corrine invested in a heat pump, added insulation strategically, and draft-proofed in specific areas of her home, in addition to upgrading her doors and windows. And as a result, she had a 32% reduction in her energy costs year over year, which really was able to maximize the investments of her retrofits. Last year, we visited 662 homes like Corrine's. While the Greener Homes grant started to wind down at the end of the year, and there hasn't been a new program to replace it, there has been people who have taken advantage of the CMHC interest-free loans of up to $40,000. Here in Woolwich, there were 19 retrofits completed by homeowners. 7 of those were heat pumps that will result collectively in an estimated $8,000 of savings year over year. Of course, many in our community aren't yet established homeowners, but they still have an important role to play. So at English Conversation Circles, we met newcomers to talk about energy literacy. Reep staff provided tips on basic information, how to read their energy bill, and simple tips to reduce their energy consumption. Our water quality is of critical importance. The wells where we draw our drinking water are increasingly under threat from salt that is used in the wintertime. Through a program run in partnership with the Region of Waterloo, we help to educate both residential and business owners about ways to reduce their salt use for winter maintenance. Participants in our Healthy Yards and Neighborhood programs receive an in-person consultation from one of our advisors. Over the past year, property owners, with our help, have installed 724 Healthy Yards features, everything from rain gardens to permeable paving to planting native trees, all of which help to reduce stormwater runoff from entering our local waterways and expanding our tree canopy. Going forward and building upon this work, we are using data and mapping tools to understand where climate vulnerability is highest in our community. Our new community canopy program, for example, enables us to be much more intentional about how we serve those who live in neighborhoods with the lowest tree canopy, but also face some of the highest barriers to planting trees. This approach is an integral strategy to adapt our communities to the bigger storms and heat waves that we know will continue to intensify over the coming years. Thinking ahead to future generations is baked into our vision. We also seek to honor our community's past. Our Tree Trust program uses donations to care for our legacy trees, which often predate the urbanization of our cities. By working with an arborist to provide proper care for heritage trees, we are able to extend the lives of these trees and continue to benefit from their shade and many other gifts. Last year, we hosted a Tree of the Year campaign where we celebrated legacy trees from across the region, and we should be announcing a new Tree of the Year very soon. We also co-lead Climate Action WR with Sustainable Waterloo Region, and in partnership with all of our area municipalities, including Woolwich. This year, we released the 2022 inventory report, which demonstrates the urgency to reduce our emissions from travel and the buildings where we live and work. And if people weren't sure where to start, we offer Taking on Climate Change workshops to guide participants on which actions to prioritize in their everyday lives. And while not everyone is able to do a deep retrofit in their home or ride a bike to work, they're still able to make a meaningful contribution. Our Zero Waste Challenge is a fun way that everyone who produces waste, i.e. everybody, including our pets, can participate. Full disclosure, I'm already on my second jar. And for my second jar, my goal is to reduce the amount of carbohydrates in my diet. So the Zero Waste Challenge, it is a monthly challenge, but there is a 7-day challenge to just kind of dip your toe in the water, which starts this Thursday. And we encourage everybody to participate. In terms of our financials, we saw significant growth last year in our fee-for-service revenue. And that's because people scheduled home energy evaluations while the Greener Homes program funding was still available. So there was a big rush for people to get their energy evals in. And those earnings will help to provide some financial stability for us over the coming year. And we'll also use that to invest in targeted programs to enable the community to reduce their home's climate impact without the reliance on these government incentive programs, which go up and down and aren't necessarily reliable. Finally, we'd like to say thank you. We couldn't do it without you. We're very grateful for your support in all its many forms. Specific call out to Mayor Shantz, who's a member of Regional Council, as you can see, is one of our core funders, as is ANOVA, which I know Woolwich is a part of. We'd also like to take the opportunity to say a special thanks to the municipal staff that we get to work with throughout the year. In particular, Anna Copeland, who's our new point person for our Climate Action WR team. And while not municipal staff, we'd also like to mention the good people at Tweak and Trees for Woolwich for their important work to conserve and expand our tree canopy and their collaboration, which they were really the inspiration for us to start our nursery. And we're working on ways that we can sort of synergize our operations to make them run more efficiently. So that's my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. Does council have any questions or comments for him? All right, seeing none. Thanks a lot for that presentation and for all the meaningful actions you take, help our community members for this community and for the planet.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up onto our next presentation, we have Committee Chair, Councillor Bonnie Bryant, to present the Heritage Committee's report and work plan.
Thank you. I think Tanya's going to pull up the slides for me, please. And the next one, please. Thank you. Our goal for this year is to increase the community awareness and celebrate the heritage. Our objectives are to raise the awareness of heritage assets and the work of the Heritage Committee. We need to foster community engagement through educational resources and events. We're planning to develop and distribute heritage community tours to showcase our local historical sites, design a digital heritage display for the Woolwich Memorial Centre, create heritage displays for community centres, Breslau and Elmira Carnegie Library. We want to produce and distribute a heritage brochure in both print and digital formats. And to date, we have already put up a driving tour of our ghost communities on the website, and we have also done a walking tour of Elmira, which has been posted as well. So what we're requesting is a total of $1,000 for the budget in funding to support our heritage education and digital media initiatives, specifically for resource development, display creation, and community-wide distribution. We would like to get $500 for education initiatives and $500 for digital media. And we're expecting that it's going to increase community participation in heritage events and enhance visibility and appreciation of Woolwich Township's cultural heritage, and hopefully strengthen community pride and identity. Can I have the next slide, please, Tanya? And we're also looking at doing heritage designations. And our goal is to prepare and present heritage designation documentation and reports for approval by staff and council. We would like to designate the Carnegie Library as a heritage site and also designate the Maryhill St. Boniface Church, Manse, and Cemetery. And what we're going to do is research and compile the historical information and architectural significance for each site, draft and submit heritage designation reports to township staff for review, present the final designation report to council for approval, and collaborate with community stakeholders to ensure broad support for designations. And we're requesting $1,000 to support the fees and activities related to this designation process. This funding will only be partially covered by the budget, and we're hoping for either some donations or some fundraising to account for the rest of the money. We're hoping that the successful designation of key heritage sites and preserving their cultural and heritage historical significance, increased awareness and appreciation of Woolwich Township's rich historical assets, and strong connections between the community and its heritage throughout the preservation of these landmarks. And final slide. So what we're looking for in total is a $2,000 request for the budget, which is half of what we've asked for last year. We know it's going to be a tough budget year, so we have reduced our request. So I think there is a request in the package. And so I'll leave it at that if there's any questions from council.
Any questions for Councillor Bryant? Councillor Schwinn?
A couple questions again. Has the committee contacted the St. Mary's Church or the
St. Mary's.
sorry,
Boniface?
Maryhill Church, St.
Yes.
Boniface? So they're happy. to be
One of our committee
designated?
members works for the church,
Okay.
so she's been in contact with the Catholic Women's League, the Maryhill Historical Society, and there's another group, and I can't remember who it was, but they're all in favor. They all want it designated.
And do we own the library? Or is
The
regional
library we can do, it's owned by the township,
Okay.
so that's an easy one.
Perfect. And second question, maybe for Clerk Smith, do we normally approve this time of year? Or do we wait for
It's
budget?
part of the budget.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we typically have the Heritage Committee present their budget and work plan, or their proposed budget and work plan before the regular budget process. And then the recommendation that we crafted is similar to what council looked at last year, which is to direct staff to include $2,000 in the draft budget,
Right.
and then that'll be subject to council's final approval during budget deliberations.
Any other questions?
Not a question, but I would move to include it in the draft budget for further discussion.
All right, that's moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call that to vote. All those in favor? And that's carried. All right, thank you, Councillor. All right, moving on to our third and final presentation here. We have our final presenter tonight is Teresa Mendler, Processing Center Manager of the Region of Waterloo. Please go ahead, guys, when you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Burgess, Mayor Shantz, and members of Woolwich Council. Thank you for the opportunity for us to join you this evening. My name is Teresa Mendler. I'm joined by my colleague Daryl Spencer, the Manager of Transportation Engineering at the Region. I'm the Manager of Automated Enforcement Processing at the Region, as well as a resident of Woolwich Township and the mother of school and daycare age children in Elmira. And that matters because Council, why we are here presenting tonight is about a very important topic, and I'd like you to hold two ideas with you. The first one is that we should all be safe. Our neighbors who walk, wheel, cycle, drive, take transit, or use a horse and buggy should be safe. The next is that all of those activities should also feel safe. Council, 72% of trips in our region are taken by car, but at the same time, 30 to 40% of residents don't drive. So the following is how the municipal speed camera program can help us all be and feel safe.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to quickly go over an overview of today's session. So we're going to talk about why should we be lowering vehicle speeds. Okay, we're going to talk about the current program, the current municipal speed camera program and Provincial Offences Act program we have in place today. We're going to talk about our plans to expand those programs. We're going to give a little bit of background to help understand community safety zones. And we're going to give a little bit of a communications update on how we plan to roll out some of these initiatives. And of course, there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. Okay, so this is a critical slide and arguably the most critical slide in this entire presentation, specifically when you look at what it's telling us. Okay, so you can see that a car traveling at 40 kilometers per hour, by the time our eyes can talk to our brain, can talk to our feet and apply the brakes, that takes 45 meters. The next is the rate at which a pedestrian can survive a collision at these various speeds. This increases when we slow down. In fact, it goes from 15% survival rate at a collision at 50 kilometers per hour to 70% survival rate at a collision at 40 kilometers per hour. So slowing down has the potential to save lives. It's science, it's true, and it's an awful thing to know. So how does speeding in the region look? Is it actually an issue here? Well, it is. On the screen, we've shown some real incidents that occurred during our pilot program of the municipal speed camera program. You can see an 80 kilometers per hour in a 30 zone in Waterloo, a 94 in a 50 in Cambridge, a 91 in a 40 in Wilmot, 111 in a 40 in Kitchener, and arguably the worst, 121 kilometers in a 60 zone here in Woolwich at the Three Bridges Road site. We have a number of other examples in Woolwich Township of these high speeds, and that's essentially what we're trying to target with this. So thinking back to the previous slide where we gave you statistics on survivability rates at 30, 40, 50, 60 kilometers per hour. But the speeds on this slide, 111, 121 kilometers per hour, we don't have a statistic to share, as I'm sure you can imagine. So Council, we, as I'm sure you do, receive a lot of community feedback seeking tools to make our neighborhoods be and feel safer. And we are learning from around the world about this. So globally, there are statistics that show that excessive speeding is a factor in 1/4 of all fatal crashes on roadways. We've also seen globally that speed cameras successfully reduce vehicle collisions by 50% in the enforced area. And further, they reduce serious and fatal injuries by up to 44%. So let's talk about how this program is working locally. So today we have 16 camera locations and 4 cameras that are rotating amongst those 16 sites. What we saw during our pilot program is an increase in 63% of drivers that are adhering to the speed limits. So that's all great stuff. It's working. It's a unique tool that really has the ability to control speeds in some of those critical areas.
We've also learned a lot. We've learned that a local processing center where tickets are issued increases efficiency. The Provincial Offences Act court, where tickets are administered today to be paid or disputed, is at capacity with long wait times to trial. And we've also learned that all schools could benefit from this program. I want to talk really briefly about the journey. It started back in 2020 with a motion from Regional Council to establish the Municipal Speed Camera Pilot Project, and just showing you through the slide that we continue to deliver on our commitment through a journey of decisions made at the Regional Council table.
Okay, so let's talk about where we go next, the program expansion. So this expansion plan has been approved by a regional council, and essentially it involves an overall plan to grow by 36 cameras per year, each year across the region until 2028. So during that expansion, each year, staff will return to regional council and report on the program, plans for expansion, and what our working group, which is comprised of staff from municipalities, area municipalities and the region, what we've identified as the next locations. So today, you're probably aware we have 2 speed cameras in the township. One of those being at Foundation Public School in Winterbourne, the other being at Clearview Mennonite School on Three Bridges Road. We also have plans in early 2025 to enable speed cameras at the Balsam Grove Parochial School on Northfield Drive and the King Alfred Academy on Lobsinger line.
Part of the plan, as previously mentioned, is a new local processing center where tickets will be issued by regional staff and an administrative penalties program. Let's talk more about administrative penalties. The region is moving the tickets from being administered through the provincial offenses court to an administrative penalties program. Using the court today limits our ability to expand beyond the current cameras. The administrative penalties process is similar to parking tickets that are paid in Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, and possibly in the future at Woolwich Township, because you have an agenda item coming up on administrative monetary penalties. So this program would be familiar to many in the cities and possibly in the future familiar to Woolwich Township residents. Under the administrative penalties program, the entire process will take a fraction of the time. Regional staff will review an appeal request with the ability to cancel or vary tickets based on an individual circumstance or financial hardship. And along with online and phone options, we can expand the number of in-person locations where tickets can be paid. Okay, so moving from provincial offenses to administrative penalties is good. It's faster, there's local control, and it's scalable. But the fines do increase. They increase by changing programs, so they only change once. They don't stack, so if you have an administrative penalties and a community safety zone, this becomes the new fine for all municipal speed camera fines. You would be familiar with these fines as they are the same fines applied by the police today in a community safety zone or in a construction zone. I will also note that the provincial offenses fines have not changed in decades, so they may at some point. And the other municipalities, such as Windsor recently, have requested this change to the province and that the fines increase, and because the fine increase, they see it as a further deterrent. Now, the goal here is road safety, and one of the outcomes is fine monies collected. The real goal is not to need community safety zones or speed cameras. Any monies collected that exceed our operating costs will be put into a road safety reserve to fund safety projects that would include the Township Traffic Calming Initiative, Roundabout Pilot Program, and roadway redesign. So we do believe that tickets will increase in the short term and then reduce over time as we all slow down. This is another area where we will report back to council on the status of the reserve as well as projects that it will be funding.
So to get a sense of how all this will work, we've got a quick video about what a community safety zone looks like. I might need a little bit of help here to get the video to play. There should be a YouTube link. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's an option as well to just move on and we can circulate the video for review afterwards. That's certainly something we're happy to do. Basically, there's a video that walks through what community safety zones look like, some of the signage that you would expect to see, you know, where some of the details around where and that sort of information. So probably not doing the video justice. So like I said, we'll circulate the link and encourage you guys to watch it after this presentation. So let's talk about then community safety zones and how the region plans to apply these around the region, specifically on regional roads where we have jurisdiction. So step one is an eligibility assessment that involves a review of the adjacent land uses like community facilities, so schools, parks, community centers, hospitals, daycares, senior residences, things of those nature. And we also want to look for areas that have speed limits of 60 kilometers per hour or less, and where we have an observed speeding problem, specifically 10 kilometers per hour or more above the posted speed. The second step involves a points-based risk factor assessment. When you're talking about road safety, it's risks. It's never black and white. You're always trying to manage probabilities and risks. And the goal of this is to identify the locations that have the highest risks. So the second step, we'll look at things like the locations with the highest traffic volumes, the highest traffic speeds, collision histories, things of that nature that might increase the risk of an incident happening in a specific section of a roadway. Okay, but why do we have school zones and why do we need community safety zones on top of that? Well, it's not for the camera. It's not for the municipal speed camera. We can actually put those in both zones. We're legally allowed to do that under the Highway Traffic Act. But there are two main reasons. One, it's to fill a gap in the ability for the school zone to provide protection to the local community. So within the Highway Traffic Act, school zones specifically extend 150 meters from the site on the road where there's a main vehicular access. It can also, a community safety zone, for example, could be applied to an adjacent road or any road near the school where we know we have a lot of school activity, children walking to school or cycling to school. And the second is to think about some of those areas I mentioned outside of school, so the senior residences and stuff like that. So if we're to actually control the speeds with a municipal speed camera, we need community safety zone designations to enable that.
So now we need everyone to be aware. So let's talk about how we plan to do that. We have 4 pillars for our education goals. Education, so on the benefits of the program, much like we're doing here tonight, awareness about the cameras, their locations, informing the residents how to pay or challenge a ticket, and partner. There's lots of ways that we partner on this program. We had mentioned earlier the working group with all of the area municipalities in the region. We also work with school boards and student transportation services, Waterloo Regional Police, and community groups. How will we do this? We'll be planning targeted mail drops to local areas where the cameras will be installed. And we'll also be doing broad communications to everyone across the region. We must consider all needs in our communications plan. There are many languages spoken across the region, and there's also lots of different ways in which our residents gather information. And another tool that we'll be using is that we'll be publishing the locations of each camera and their performance on this new map. Council, this program isn't intended to be punitive, hidden, or secretive. We simply want people to slow down in our communities and be aware of the locations that needs more support by everyone, so that our friends and neighbors can be safe and feel safe. And thank you. Daryl and I welcome your questions.
Thank you for that, Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you to the delegates. I think what struck out to me on your report was the 16 locations, but there's only 4 cameras. So how does that work exactly?
Through you, Chair. So right now, like our existing program, there are 16 sites that are built out and there are 4 cameras that are physically rotated from site to site. But I would note that moving forward, as we adopt a new program in early 2025, we're moving away from that strategy and permanently mounting cameras at all the locations. So the 2 legacy locations that we already have operational here will have cameras permanently mounted at those sites in January, or I should say the first quarter of 2025.
Okay, so currently though, they're just rotating on a kind of random schedule, or is it? I guess I'm wondering how we know where the cameras are at what time.
Yeah, through the chair. So we've basically been rotating them on a set schedule of every 4 to 6 weeks up until now. And then we use signage in the field to clearly indicate to the members of the community where where the cameras are in use. So specifically, you'll see a municipal speed camera in use sign, or you may see a municipal speed camera coming soon sign. So the locations that are actually active, they are published online on our website as well. I know that that's not easy to find, but there is signage in the field that clearly indicates that a camera is there and in use.
Okay, thank you. It's helpful. It feels deterrence is the camera, it's physically being there is part of the deterrence. And if we're posting signs showing it, it kind of eliminates that deterrence factor to a certain point.
Thank you. Looks like we got the movie ready if you want to play that.
We're on Westmount Road in Kitchener to learn about community safety zones, what they mean, how to recognize them, and what drivers need to know to ensure they're following the rules of the road. Community safety zones begin with a sign letting you know you're entering an area where there's more pedestrians, places like schools, childcare centers, parks, retirement homes, or sports fields. This sign is a cue to drivers that you need to slow down and pay closer attention. In community safety zones, fines are increased to deter speeding and protect those walking, biking, or rolling. This sends an important message about how critical it is to follow the posted speed limit. There will be another sign further along to indicate the point where the community safety zone ends. At this point, the speed limit may change. Remember, the speed limit still applies, but regular fines return. In some school zones, an active camera detects vehicles traveling over the limit. Take extra caution. A ticket will be issued to license plate owners of vehicles traveling above the limit in this area. In Waterloo Region, speed cameras operate only in school zones, which is a stretch of road 150 meters on either side of the school property line. Some municipalities, including Barrie, Guelph, Brampton, York Region, and Ottawa, have designated all school zones as community safety zones as a best practice. Throughout the region, there are roads near schools that have high pedestrian traffic, but don't fit the Highway Traffic Act definition of a school zone. This means they don't qualify for the added protection speed cameras and higher fines provide. By designating these areas as community safety zones, we can help ensure all schools in the region are equipped with the same protection to make our roads safer for pedestrians walking, rolling, and biking.
Chair, if we could just add one comment on the video that our colleague filmed that from the passenger side and was not driving. We just want that on the record.
All right, Councillor Bryant. And then
Thank
Mayor
you.
Shantz.
Through you to the delegate. When you're mounting these cameras, are they only at public schools? Do they do high schools as well and private schools?
Through the chair to the councillor, no, we'll be using the cameras at any qualifying school. So that could mean a parochial school, a private school, secondary schools, but that's essentially where it ends. We're not looking at post-secondary schools at this point, but yeah, high schools, parochial schools, they're all under consideration for the program.
And they don't have to apply, they just get looked at as part of your general, I guess, workload?
Yeah, through the chair. So that's right. We look at it like the roadway specifically. So each school, it's a combined effort. Staff from the municipalities are helping us with that because some of the schools may fall on Woolwich roads, for example. But yeah, any school is under consideration. So the way we've been doing it up until now is looking at some of those risk factors and essentially targeting the locations that have maybe the highest speeds or those highest combined risk factors, but they will all be considered and, you know, it's essentially deployed on a priority basis based on those risk factors.
Okay, thank you. And I have a couple of other questions. Do they only run certain hours or are they a 24-hour-a-day camera?
Through the chair. So we actually can't disclose the enforcement hours because it potentially erodes the integrity of the enforcement operations. The signage is sort of indicative of 24 hours. I would say that our advice to motorists is to adhere to the speed limit 24 hours of the day, and that's the best way to ensure you don't get a speeding ticket.
Okay, and my final question, do you mount them up high? And the reason I ask that, I've been through Brampton many times and they have some on the low level and they've been spray painted out. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, through the chair. So we Because we use fixed cameras, they tend to be mounted a little bit higher than some of the locations that you're citing in Brampton. I'm assuming they're using some of the mobile units that, yeah, that's right. So we're not doing that at the region. We do tend to mount them higher. They could be even mounted on a hydro pole, for example, or streetlight poles. We have options for where we mount them. They are higher. They do still experience some cases of vandalism, but it's relatively minor in terms of the numbers. And yeah, it's generally more manageable with the fixed camera systems.
Thank you.
Mayor Sean, said you still want to chime in?
I do. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate hearing it again. And but I do have a question, and that is, will it be, or is it possible for area municipalities to install their own camera and have the region take care of it through the department?
Thanks, Mayor Shantz. The question's a great question. Currently, we have a contract with the vendor and we are establishing ourselves as a processing center, but we would be happy to have further conversations with the township about becoming a joint processing center, which would allow us to process tickets on your behalf. So that's not direction that we've received from regional council, but that's something that we could absolutely have conversations about.
Do you have any sense of what that might cost? I know region we're assuming sort of cost neutral, but just wondering in the township, for example, if we have places that we might like to place it that the region is not prioritizing.
Sorry, you're cutting out a bit there, Mayor Sean. So I don't know if you turned your
Okay.
off, if that would help if you re-asked it.
I'll give that a try. It's an unstable connection here. It's not good. Are there, so could we, if we have places that we would like to have a camera installed that are not a priority for the region, do you have any sense of what the cost to us might be? I know at the regional level, it's to be cost neutral. Would that apply? And maybe that's not a fair question because you haven't considered it, but.
Yeah, through the chair, the cost is a little bit difficult to calculate. I will say you have to consider things like staffing costs and resources to operate the program. The other thing is with the agreement that we're about to sign with our vendor, there's cost savings in numbers. So because we have brought a plan to them that involves such a high number of cameras, it's probably cheaper for us to operate the program. And again, there's just cost savings with having a large program to operate. So sorry, I can't really give you a number. I would just say, like, economically, the model that we've developed with the region probably makes the most sense, like, from an economic perspective.
And just through you, Chair Burgess, too, maybe to help out Mayor Shantz, all of the area municipalities have worked in concert with the region on this, and there is an analysis and a metrics that was all agreed and approved to. So we've been afforded opportunities to have various sites, and we prioritize those based on all the metrics that Mr. Spencer was speaking to as well. So we do have priority listing, and when we are afforded opportunities, we roll through that list from priority perspective. So I think in the fullness of time, and I don't want to speak out of turn, the goal would be to have all of the school zones, obviously, with ASE ultimately, and that's just going to take some time. So I hope that helps.
Well, a little bit. Not all the school zones are on regional roads is part of my concern, and there are other areas that aren't school zones that I think that we potentially might prioritize parks and community centers, for example.
And through Chair Burgess to Mayor Shantz, appreciate that. And we have listed all of our school zones in the township, and they are all priority. They all have priority rankings. Apologies. And then as well to the expansion piece, that would involve what was being spoken to about the community safety zones and expanding that program. But right now, all of our school zones are prioritized. So we do have a good a list and a good understanding of where the challenges are. all across Woolwich with respect to school zones currently. But stay tuned, I think, for a greater expansion of the program.
Okay, thanks. I'll leave it there.
Councillor Cadeau?
Thanks, Chair. Through you, just in relation to the Road Safety Reserve Fund, who controls that budget? Is it the region that controls that? And I'm asking because if there's tickets being issued here in Woolwich, is that to fund roadway redesign in Waterloo? How can we ensure that the funds that are extracted from Woolwich come back to Woolwich?
Thank you, Councillor. That's a great question. And I think tonight we could fairly say this ends our road trip. We've done all 7 area municipalities. It's a great question, and we heard that early on, and we have committed through regional council to look at a framework of what that looks like. So we don't know today what that framework will be, but our Commissioner, Doug Spooner, has committed to work on a framework that would have a lens that would be applied to all 7 area municipalities as a partnership with the region, as well as a partner that's leading the program. And so we will report back on what that looks like.
Any other questions from council for the presenters while they're here? All right, seeing none. Thanks a lot, guys, for the presentation and your work on community safety for us. On behalf of council, thank you all for all the presenters who came to present to council tonight. We appreciate your time and effort. Moving on, we have no delegations, no unfinished business. And now we're on to consent items. On the consent agenda tonight, we have 2 items for approval and 1 item for information and public notice. Before we pass a motion approving the items, does anyone on council wish to remove any items for further discussion? Seeing and hearing no one, the following consent items be approved and received for information. Item 12.11, recommendations from the Committee of the Whole, October 8th. Item 12.1.2, the memo signed bylaw amendment. And lastly, item 12.2.1, the notice of hearing. Would anyone like to move that? Councilor Bryant, seconded by Councilor Cadeau. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that's carried. Perfect. All right, moving on to staff reports and memos. First up here, we have Jeff Smith, Director of Corporate Services and Municipal Law Enforcement, Supervisor Vanessa Albanese, on the Administrative Monetary Penalty System, also known as AMPS. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just wanted to give a reminder to council. We're a little later than we originally thought in this process. We were hoping for a mid-year implementation date, but I will say this is consistent with council's directions during budget. I really want to thank Officer Albanese for getting all this together. She is here and she will go through the details of this report. If council approves it tonight, there'll be more work for Ms. Albanese. She has several roles, and you may notice she's assigned me some additional roles, so we'll have to work through those. But I'll turn it over to Vanessa, Mr. Chair, and she'll walk you through the report tonight.
Thank you, Chair. To follow up on my previous report from September 24th. Oh, sorry, let me turn on my camera. To follow up on my previous report from September 24th, final council approval is required to transition from the enforcement of township bylaws from the Provincial Offences Act to the municipally operated administrative monetary penalty system known as AMPS. With the implementation of AMPS, there are several policies that are mandated by legislation. These policies include the prevention of political interference, which ensures accountability and transparency, conflict of interest, which establishes guidelines to prevent conflict of interest relating to the administration of the system, financial management, which outlines the administrative fees for collection of non-parking penalty notices, the procedures for refunds of canceled or reduced penalties, public complaints policy, which sets out procedures for filing and processing public complaints, undue hardship, which establishes procedures to exercise penalties in the cases of hardships. The township must also amend the existing enforcement bylaws to align with the penalty provisions in AMPS. These bylaws include all parking bylaws, including the non-parking bylaws like clean yards, animal control, licensing, noise, and all other relevant bylaws. We will also be establishing a two-step process for disputing penalties through a screening and hearing. The Director of Corporate Services would be authorized to appoint these officers. The screening officers will be township staff, and the hearing officers will be an appointed third party. Through the Ministry of Transportation, we are in the process of updating our ARIS agreement that will provide vehicle ownership information, which facilitates the mailing of penalty notices and follow-ups, including license plate denials for unpaid notices. Once we receive council approval, we will be able to proceed with ordering new ticket books, updating in the enforcement software, creating internal spreadsheets for tracking, and establishing new internal processes for handling penalty notices. We do expect an increase in workload throughout this process, but we will have AMPS fully implemented on November 5th for both parking and non-parking bylaws. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does council have any questions or comments? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, got one here. Almost made it.
Had to collect my thoughts there for a moment. I'm struggling a little bit with the dual role nature of this, and I'm hoping you can give a little bit more information as to the screening and the hearing officer, specifically why the hearing officer wouldn't be eligible to be a township staff. Is that something that's legislated, or is that just best practice?
I believe it's part of the policy for the hearing officer. We don't want anyone to say that there was any influence with being a hearing officer. So just say Jeff is a hearing officer. We don't want to say that he was in our favor. So it's best just to do a third party.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, there is a recommendation on your agenda. Would someone on council like to move that? Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. All right, thank you for that presentation, Vanessa. All right, moving on to the next report here. This is the Director of Finance and Treasurer column on a finance staffing plan, a new position. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Burgess, and through you to Council. I'm presenting the 2024 Finance Staffing Plan. The major ask here is the pre-budget approval for a Senior Financial Analyst position. Just to provide some background, I'm fairly new to the role. I've been in my position for just less than 5 months. And coming into the position, I've realized that there's an immediate need for this Senior Financial Analyst position. We have limited staff capacity to do a lot of the financial analysis and modeling work that I feel is pretty essential to assist with the ongoing fiscal sustainability for the township. Just to give you a little bit of context, over the last 12 years, and I just picked 12 years because I had that amount of data available, there's been relatively little increase in the amount of staffing available in the finance department and the capacity to do that. At the same time, our budget has essentially doubled. So we have the same amount of staff essentially handling twice the volume of budget, operating capital, and water wastewater budgets. So with that increased in volume, it's meant that a lot of the focus or the previous analysis that may have been done or capacity that may have existed to do some of that work has had to really shift just to keep the lights on, a lot of the day-to-day operating activities for that. And as a result, a lot of the proactive or future-focused modeling and analysis has really taken a back seat. So we really haven't had the capacity. So over the years, because it hasn't become a priority, we've fallen a little behind in a lot of our processes and our systems because we haven't really kept up to date with that because of the volume and work. I do go through some of the structures, the finance structures in our department, but essentially we have quite a gap between a lot of our frontline customer service and support positions, and a lot of the analytical work has to be done by management staff. We're missing a lot of those middle tier type of positions. So this impacts us on progression and career development for some of the existing staff. And also it limits our ability as management to delegate to staff because of just the skill set involved in the frontline customer service focused staff. So it limits our capacity to do some of that analysis. So in addition, the complexity of a lot of financial systems and analysis has really taken off over the past 15 years or so. There's been a lot of new public sector accounting board standards, grant reporting requirements, and just general complexity that comes with a growing municipality, increased requirements for financial analysis. And I do feel the expectation of council has also increased over the years with the amount of data and analysis that council and the public expect from the team. So we're under increasing pressure to perform a lot of this analysis, to do this work. So what we're requesting, what I'm here requesting is for a pre-budget approval for a senior financial analyst to assist with some of that capacity. It will really help us help with some of the work that we really haven't had a chance to get to and relieve some of the pressures that already exist on our department and our existing staff workload. Some of these include investment and cash flow modeling. We outsource a lot of the investment work right now. We would look at trying to take that in-house and increase our investment returns with some of this work. Improving our long-term forecasting and modeling. We've had a very short-term kind of focus, and we'll improve some of those financial models and some of that work, reserve modeling, debt analysis, a lot of the future work. Also looking at policy and process improvements. We haven't had a lot of chance to do some of that continuous improvement work that we would like to do. We've just been focused on kind of keeping the lights on in a lot of the day-to-day operations. It would also assist other departments with budget development and capital planning. They're required to write financial implications in all of the reports. Sometimes they may not have the expertise or really understand the financial implications for a lot of these large projects. So because we don't have the financial support to look at every report in the township, they could also assist departments in providing counsel with better financial implications and understanding the financial impacts of those decisions. And just more broadly, I'm very big on data, key performance indicators, and other analysis. And they would also try to modernize the use of data and analytics, dashboards, and those kind of things overall in the organization to assist with that. The reason it's coming to you now and instead of at budget is this is an immediate need. This has probably been an ongoing need for quite some time. We've trying to just kept the lights on, but we really haven't done this kind of long-range planning and analytics. So that's why we're coming to you right now. If we waited until the budget is approved in February or late February, by the time we get a posting out there and someone, the recruitment process notice, we're probably looking at an April, May, even June timeframe to get a position in-house to assist with that work. Having pre-budget approval helps us right away. We could hopefully get someone in place much quicker, perhaps even before Christmas, to help with some of the budget work that we have right now, but a lot of the upcoming work that we have on a lot of our studies and long-term financial planning. So that's the ask for this. At the same time, I'm calling it a staffing plan because there's other lower cost or no cost activities that we're also performing in the finance department, which includes upskilling and training of staff. Any new positions that are being posted or vacancies, we're looking at kind of our immediate needs and if the current job description meets those needs, and making sure that we're always making the best use of our available headcount. I do feel that this is a needed position. I feel that finance positions like this pay for themselves with the potential cost savings, but understanding it is a tough budget year, and just looking for approval for this finance position.
Thank you. Councilor Godot.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chair. Through you to the director, when we're looking at financial impacts, you referenced this. I just was hoping that you could expand on it, but you're suggesting that if we were to approve this position, you would have the capacity to take on the externally managed investment portfolio. You would bring that in-house. About how much of this current salary would that offset? I guess is the main question. I know that it's in the report, but I think for the benefit of any of the public watching, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Cadeau, I was hesitant to include a specific number, so I was looking for council to endorse the full salary, but as I said, there would be a lot of savings in analysis that we could perform in-house. But one specific item would be our investment portfolio, which is roughly around $10 million, is externally managed at the moment. So we're not necessarily getting the best rate of return on those investments. So there's two things. One is the rate of return. They take a certain commission, so we would not pay that commission, and we would shop around for the best rates every time we had to invest in GICs. So I would estimate between 40 and 100,000 for the total portfolio if we had it in-house. But we do have a laddered investment portfolio, meaning that our investments mature every year over the next 5 years. So we couldn't take all 10 million in-house right away. It would be a gradual process as those investments matured, but that would also provide additional insights into our cash flow profile. So right now we don't regularly manage proactively those investments. We've had that same $10 million amount for 15 to 20 years. But I would say that we could probably, if we had more active management of that, we would know our cash flow needs, and we could potentially invest for longer term durations, a higher amount than the 10 million, and also know our liquidity needs. If we had a big project on the go, we would plan for some of those maturities to match some of those needs. So we'd have a better understanding and potentially not just get a better rate of return, but have more money potentially invested, which would offset that salary. And that's just one item in many things that I think we would find savings.
Mayor Shantz.
Thank you, and thanks, Director Lynn, for the presentation. I normally this time of year, I'm not fond of
You're frozen again if you want to try without the camera. Yeah, might have lost you in the moment. I'll move on. Oh,
or
got you back.
okay, you're moving, so maybe you can hear me now.
Yes, you're good to go.
I'll keep my camera off. Normally I'm not fond of doing pre-budget approvals at this time of year, but I do know that this position has been requested, or a similar position, for a number of years, and I would hope that it would assist in the budget time frame to get good data to council. I would also say that there's probably 20 hours a week of overtime being spent at a higher level than this would be, that should be done. It should free up time for some of our more senior people to provide oversight for us. So I will support this ask at this time, but hopefully we don't get a lot of pre-budget asks like.
Gotcha, right to the end there. Does anyone else have any questions? Go ahead, Council Bryant.
Thank you. Just a comment. As Mayor Shant said, I don't like pre-budget requests. I think it needs to be included in the budget. For me, I'm just not comfortable with pre-budget requests, so I would rather wait.
Councilor Schwint.
Thanks, Chair Burgess. One question you mentioned in the report about the need to update our financial package program. Can you comment on how long that would take next year if approved in 2025 budget?
Through the chair to Councillor Schwind. We're going to be, as mentioned in the report, I wanted to provide context and a holistic picture to council in making this decision. That will be coming to council for budget consideration with potential approval January, February. I estimate it would take about 2 years to implement like software of this nature. It's quite complex software. It touches every department in the organization. So it would probably take about 2 years to implement the finance software. And we would probably need temporary support positions in order to fully implement that because we don't have existing capacity to implement such a large software package currently in the finance department.
So in follow up to that, at the end of the 2-year period, my anticipation is we'll have some savings on processing time. We should be more efficient and time savings. How do you anticipate that time saving to be not spent but allocated? How can it be used for the organization? Will it be less people? Will it be doing other jobs? Where do you see the savings?
Through the chair, we don't know exactly what we're going to save. I do anticipate that a lot of the processes that are quite manual right now, we would probably be able to automate. A lot of the billing type of work hopefully can work with existing software to do a lot more self-service, which would reduce the need for frontline customer service staff. I can't see really a need for not having frontline customer service staff to provide that in person or on the phone support, but it would just provide additional analytical abilities and reduce kind of process where some staff could focus more time and attention onto things that they don't have now. And as we grow, rather than have to add additional staff to support future growth, we could probably accommodate that with the existing complement with the new software. But we'd have to see exactly once it's up and running what those savings would be.
Okay. Well, that's helpful in understanding it better. So my comments are going to be, we're back to the time of year, as Councillor Bryant mentioned, and Mayor Shantz, it's tough to do these one-offs, adding staff, when we know a really tough budget's coming in January. So I'm struggling with the timing, but I also recognize there's a need in the department for more help. We're antiquated in our finance department, no doubt there. But I see another director across the room from me that's probably saying the same thing in his department, and probably a couple more behind me as well. And there's not enough money to go around for everybody. At this point this year, I'd be much more comfortable pre-approving purchasing new software and the associated temporary help for that to get that fast-tracked and moving, so that when we do then hire a senior analyst, they've got good data to work with, and we understand really what we need in that position. So at this point, I can't support the pre-approval. I'd support pre-approval financing packages and that process to speed it up. And then this time next year, hopefully being able to support this new position.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Chair. I was just looking for some justification as to why it's a senior financial analyst. I notice in the org chart we have an accounting analyst. Would it make sense just to come up with a financial analyst, which would probably bring it down a level or two in the pay scale?
Through the chair to Councillor Cadeau. So I did do a lot of thinking about what level this position should be and what the current skill set in the department is. And I feel that the senior analyst is really what's kind of missing. I would say the financial analyst is kind of borderline between clerical and analytical. There's some analytical work, but the skill set required for modeling and investment management and portfolio management would be higher than what the current kind of accounting analyst grade would be. I would be looking at, I think I included the job description, at something close to a qualified accountant with a professional designation, which we probably wouldn't get, or we wouldn't get at that job grade. And just the skill set required for the managers to delegate the work and to trust that the staff could do it, would need a more senior job grade, somewhere in the middle of the pay band. I put in around a grade 5 or so in our current system.
Any other questions from council? Yep, Councilor Grant.
Thank you. Just through you to Colm, just to clarify, this would also not be considered a management position, correct? They wouldn't be overseeing staff.
Through the chair, that's correct. So this is more a very kind of a technical type of position. It's not a management position. It's very much a working position with a kind of a very senior skill set of working with large data sets with financial models and doing that kind of work. They could potentially move into a management type of position depending on the person, but it also provides that backfill support if someone went and wanted to go, or retired or wanted to go on leave, to fill in for potentially those management roles. With such a gap that we have right now, I don't think there's such a large divide that we probably have to look external in order to fill kind of some of those vacancies if they came up in the future.
Thank you. And so essentially, if say you needed to take a leave of absence, or the deputy treasurer needed to take a leave of absence, this position could serve as a temporary backfill as opposed to leaving us where we've been in previous situations where that position is sitting vacant.
Through the chair, that's correct. Yeah.
Any last questions? Seeing none, there is a recommendation on the agenda for this position. Would anyone on council like to move that? Councilor Cadeau, anyone like to second it? Councilor Grant? Any further discussion?
Can we record this vote, please, Mr. Chair?
And I think before we vote, Mayor Shantz had her hand up.
No, it's okay. I think I said my piece. I just would reiterate that this position has been requested for a number of years over the last council as well. So again, I support the ask. I think it's needed, and yeah.
Go ahead, Clerk Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will call the question. I'll call for votes in favor and against in a random order. And just to remind council, the motion you're voting on is to provide pre-budget approval request to add a senior financial analyst position. So Councilor Cadeau.
In favor.
Councilor Schwint.
Opposed.
Mayor Shantz. Mayor Shantz? She is still connected, it looks like, but her microphone is muted and maybe she's still having technical difficulties.
Yeah, it just opened up. I'm in favor.
Thank you. Chair Burgess?
Opposed.
Councilor Grant?
In favor.
And Councilor Bryant?
Opposed.
Mr. Chair, that yes, sorry, that is tied 3-3. So with the tie motion, that motion fails.
All right, thank you for that, Clerk Smith. Yes, Councillor Schwint.
Trying to move the process along, I understand there is need in the finance department. I'm just not comfortable with the staffing position at this point. I would be very comfortable trying to fast track the RFP on the accounting software and ensuring we've got contract staff in place to move that process as quickly as possible. So I would make that motion and see if there's appetite on council for that. Mr. Brenneman's concerned.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to council. My concern would be council voting on a program that they haven't seen a staff report for. If your intention was to have staff expedite the bringing forward of the report so that you could sooner rather than later consider that, if that's what you're trying to get council support, I could see. Because I think Colin would agree that council should see that information. The other thing that I would be careful and hesitant about is that there are a lot of asks under the capital program. This will be a significant ask under the capital program. And I think you need to see also all of the issues that we're dealing with under the capital program. Just as I've heard tonight that some members of council aren't comfortable dealing with the staffing position outside of the budget process, I would just be careful that in the absence of a staff report and in the absence of a review of all of the capital requests asked, that it may be difficult. I understand the intent through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Schwint. We appreciate, the recognition that there are needs, but I would just be careful. And I think, Colin, if you want to address some of that, in terms of what your thinking is, that would be appreciated too.
Sure. Through the chair to all of council, I would agree with CAO Brenneman on that. We haven't taken a staff report, so we're in the final phases of selecting a preferred vendor. We're still finalizing some of the questions with that preferred vendor, but we haven't taken the actual cost to council, and it's higher than, I can share that it is higher than what we originally anticipated in the previous budget. So it is going to be higher, plus the additional staff requests. We would bundle all of that together in a total package, but because we have limited capital funding, it would potentially displace other projects that need to be done. So in order to expedite that outside of the context of the rest of the budget, I would just recommend making a holistic decision in the capital budget. That isn't to say that we were planning on taking something to council in November just to close the loop on kind of, this is our preferred vendor, this is the cost, this is the staffing plan. The intent there would have been to give you a heads up on closure of that initial request, but then to include it in the capital budget. And I suppose you could make a decision there once you have all the information in front of you, if you want to expedite that ahead of the capital budget. Would probably be better than tonight, I think.
Do you want to follow up at all on that?
I guess my intent's clear. I'm in favor of moving ahead with this process as quickly as possible, but we can't do it faster than staff can move along. So that's enough direction, I think, at this point.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, moving on. Oh, sorry, Mayor Johnson, see you there.
Thank you. I'm just, I think I heard councillors reflect what I also had said about the timing of the ask for the senior financial analyst. And so I wouldn't preclude that from coming back as part of the budget process. Hopefully that's the will of council. The other thing is bring that whole piece together with the software and the finance, so it's a whole package. That might, but you were cutting in and out for me as well, so I think that is coming as part of the budget process. Is that correct? The software package and what goes along with that?
Through the chair, Mayor Shantz, just to clarify, there'll be a report ahead of budget outlining our preferred vendor, the estimated cost, potential staffing solutions in order to implement that for consideration during budget. So it will come ahead of budget, probably in November, but would also be included then in the capital budget.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, this position will also be in the budget in January as a holistic package. Yeah.
Through the chair, that'd be my intention.
Yeah, perfect. All right, moving on to the next report here. Also from the Director of Finance and Treasurer, we have the Water and Wastewater Study Review.
Through the chair, so I'm presenting the Water and Wastewater Financial Plan and Rate Study prepared by BMA. You can see the full report from BMA as attachment 1 to this report. I'll go through some of the highlights in more detail, and you can, of course, feel free to ask some questions about this. So our current water wastewater study hadn't been so standard practice is to update our water and wastewater rates every year annually, and we have done that in the township, primarily based on any regional increase in our rates. So we have a 2-tiered system, and the region supplies wholesale water and wastewater rates, and we're responsible for the local portion. So we add our costs into the final rates supplied by the region. We update those rates every year, but we haven't done a full deep dive into our water and wastewater rates since 2005. So the last rate study was in 2005, with implementation in 2006. So this is a long time overdue, and this is partially the result of a lack of capacity in the finance department to do these kind of deep dive financial analysis. So our current water rates are below the average generally. You can see some of the history. In some years, there were very low or even 0 rates during COVID. And more recently, we've needed to catch up on some of the rates and the history, with last year on the water being an 11.6% increase. And then on the wastewater was a 6.6% increase. So our water rates are generally below our industry peers, with the wastewater rates significantly above our industry peers. And part of that, I believe, is due to kind of our allocation of costs on the water and wastewater side, because our water rates are low and our wastewater rates are high. They're overall combined, we're more in line with our industry average. One thing that jumped out to me during this analysis is our fixed rate, our reserve contribution to support our capital program, hadn't been updated since that 2005-2006 rate study, and it stayed at the $26 bi-monthly fixed rate. So you're probably aware, over the past number of years, capital costs have increased, with something about a 40% increase just in the last 5 years. So not increasing that capital contribution in almost 18 years has meant that we haven't had enough funding for our capital program. The other thing going through this study is realize that there's no operating reserves, or what's called operating or rate stabilization reserves. So those are used to offset any operating deficits that we would normally experience in our water and wastewater rates. It also can provide some, as the name might suggest, some stabilization in any rate increases that we may want to do. So it helps potentially to phase in rates. That's the purpose of some of those reserves. We don't have those kind of operating reserves. So any deficits that's in our operating, in our water or wastewater program, has to come out of that same pot of money that our capital program is used. And as I mentioned before, that capital pot, or that amount that flows into that program, hasn't changed in 18 years. So we were already probably constrained with a very fixed rate. And then dipping into it more with the more recent water and wastewater deficits has probably constrained us even further. So the BMA report recommends a 6.3% increase in our water rates and a 10.2% in our wastewater rates. I would say those are baseline rates at a minimum, because Woolwich also has a number of additional issues that we would need to address before setting actual rates. One of them would be those rate stabilization reserves. I would recommend putting a contribution into those rate stabilization reserves, so to protect against future fluctuation in those operating rates. Also, our current program, our operating program, is in a deficit currently at the moment. So the BMA study assumed that our current program was self-sustaining, but with the recent deficits that we've seen, I'm not sure the existing rates that BMA are proposing will be enough to address the backlog in funding that is required. BMA suggests that we should issue debt to essentially bring those deficits to a positive balance. One of the constraints we have under the Municipal Act is we can't issue debt for operating expenditures. We can only issue debt for the capital program. So I would recommend issuing debt for any future capital projects, but that would be longer than what's anticipated in the BMA report to return those reserve funds to a positive balance, because we would have to wait until there's relevant capital projects in order to issue the debt, which would essentially save any of the reserve contributions that we're getting in order to kind of bring us to zero kind of more gradually through that program. Another thing that's come through in this report is the need for further analysis on our water and wastewater program to just have a better understanding of what's driving some of these deficits and have a little bit more analysis when we're setting our future water wastewater rates. I can commit that we'll never go another 18 years without a rate study, but we should be doing more analysis on this kind of level on a more regular basis to understand what those contributions are required to make sure that we're not falling behind on those operating and capital contributions, and making sure that we're sustainable over the long term. So I'm not proposing in this report. I just say to receive the report. As we just discussed, we're right in the middle of budget process, to receive this report, to direct staff to do further analysis, and to bring back the BMA recommendations as a baseline and come with holistic recommendations as part of the rate setting process that we do every year in order to set the future water wastewater rates. I'll also be looking at potentially blending the water and wastewater increases, so we don't have such a high increase on water or wastewater, that we can kind of make a more palatable total increase on either the water and wastewater side. But I do include potential impacts of what that would look like for the average user. So I'll open it up to questions from council.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you, Jacome. You just mentioned combining the water and wastewater rates into one. What does that mean for individuals like in the communities like Maryhill, West Montrose, that don't have sewage treatment facilities, we're all on septics? Are they going to be paying more because they don't have to? I don't know. I'm just questioning the numbers, because if they're only using water, why are they paying the higher rates because of other communities that have the wastewater issues?
Through the chair to Councillor Bryant, I'm not suggesting combining the water and wastewater rates into a single rate.
No, but you're talking about balancing them. So basically,
Yes.
You'd be penalizing the communities that are on septics to compensate for the ones that are on wastewater treatment.
It would be looking more holistically at the cost allocation for the program. So I want to know and explain to council in a little bit more detail why our water rates, because we have the same wholesale rates from the region, why our water rates are so much lower than our comparators, while our wastewater rates are so much higher than our comparators. And there are a number of potential issues, infill and infiltration, which there's a report coming later for that. but also just looking at our internal staff cost allocation. Are we allocating costs correctly to the water program and the wastewater program, and doing a little deeper dive onto how we're setting our water and wastewater rates, similar to this study, which looked kind of holistically, looking at a more internal type of analysis before we set rates, and not just saying we need to do a blanket increase, but looking at our rates more holistically, that potentially maybe our water rates need to increase to cover those costs, and that we're kind of subsidizing our wastewater with some of our water rates as well, but not combining those, just doing a better job of cost allocation.
Okay, but you still would be subsidizing one to offset the other, basically. Is that not what you're saying? Like you would increase water by, say, 4% to offset the, no? Am I misunderstanding what you're saying?
Through the chair, we haven't recommended any of that. That's just a potential, looking more
Okay.
detailed at the program. So if you look at one of the graphs in there, you can
Yeah.
see the wastewater component of
Right.
the total rate is
Yeah.
much higher in Woolwich than any of our comparators.
Right.
So I don't really understand, without further analysis,
Okay.
why our wastewater component is so much higher than our water component.
Okay.
And maybe it's because of those internal cost allocations, but it'll be presented to council with that analysis, with a detailed
Okay.
description
So
before
we'll get,
we set.
okay, we'll get a better understanding going forward then of what these rates will mean.
Yes.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Counselor Schmidt.
So I appreciate the report. There's a lot of detail in here, and we've been waiting, I guess, we discussed this in the August meeting or September meeting about how to deal with the deficits on the wastewater side of things. Now we've got the numbers in front of us. I understand we don't have the detailed analysis on whether it should be a higher increase on wastewater or the water, but left pocket or right pocket, my thing is one bank account for the township of Woolwich, and it's going down. So I guess I'm really struggling with putting off any increase until, say, March of next year, once the budget's approved, when we know that I guess the 7% and 10 or 11% is going to be the baseline increase needed. You can apportion it either way, but we're going to need more than that somehow over time. So why would we not try and stop the bleeding now, either December 1st or January 1st, so we can take the time then, do the proper allocation over the next 4 or 5 months and move forward again. So my recommendation would be to start these rate changes December 1st or January 1st.
Mayor Shantz.
I guess I'm still not clear on whether the rate change should be in water or wastewater, one or the other or both. So I'm not sure I'm ready to potentially increase water and then find out that, whoops, we didn't need to increase water that much. We should have increased wastewater. So I want to make sure we've got the right picture. I agree. There's going to be an increase. And so in light of our previous discussion, I wonder, no, I'm not going to go there. Okay, go ahead.
Counselor Schmidt.
Fair point, Mayor Shantz. We need to do more work to pin down the number to the right decimal point, but I'll bet dollars to donuts that a 5% and a 10% won't cover what we need. Maybe it's 6.4 and 15, but to have a baseline increase now for people that are using the service now, we should be charging it, I feel. And knowing there will be adjustments coming down the road, but I think the average resident won't be too concerned whether they're paying more for water or wastewater. They know they're paying more. Because I don't think staff has given us any indication that there's going to be savings found in the analysis. It's just the understanding what the costs actually are.
Mayor Shantz.
I'd ask Mr. Lynn if there's is there a lot of work in doing a rate change? How does that work internally if we were to do a rate change now and do another rate change in March? Are we creating a lot of duplicate work?
Through the chair to Mayor Shantz, I don't think that's, the internal staff work is significant. We would have to give notice to all the residents and update our rates in our system, but I wouldn't want to not increase just because of the amount of work involved potentially. To Councillor Schwint's point, this is probably the minimum that is required, what's in the BMA. I would like to provide, further analysis with this as staff's recommendation as a fulsome number rather than have a stopgap measure and then another measure come forward. But I don't have that full number in front of me right now. There is talk about, cost allocations and blending and reserve contributions and backfill and what our minimum reserve target should be. But I do feel it is pretty close to what would be recommended. It would probably be higher. That's in there. It would probably, I would say, December 1st would probably be the earliest we could implement a rate change like this. Maybe January 1st. First would probably be the right time. I'd have to check with our revenue department. We'd want to do it on like the right billing cycle. So it's a 2-month billing cycle. So it might be, now that I'm talking out loud, probably January 1st, because if we update it March 1st, that's a 2-month billing cycle. So I would say January 1st would be the target. I'm not sure. It's the will of council whether that 2 months is relevant or not for this.
Councillor.
No, thanks. That's good.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Chair. I do share Councillor Schwint's sense of urgency in doing something about these rates. However, we've waited 20 years. What's another few months is kind of the position that I'm taking on this one. I'm willing to wait and get the full assessment and staff's perspective on things. I think that's the prudent thing to do in this case.
Just a couple questions from me, if I may. Looking at the table, we are in line with our peers for the water and wastewater. And just curious if you had any comments why we're in such a deficit compared to them, or are they in similar shoes looking at big increases in the future? Or kind of just if you could talk about that.
To you, Chair Burgess. I can't really speak to all of the other municipalities. We do share the same wholesale rate, so they've been looking at the same increases, more based on the regional increases. There's a small table around 5%. I don't believe they have the same deficits that we have. And I can't really speak to exactly why. Has to be more analysis done on exactly what's driving a lot of those deficits. I do believe a lot of them, especially on the wastewater side, are related to consumption and just a revenue, making sure that we're collecting all the revenue that we should be collecting. We have a new remote read program, and there's been, I think, some teething issues with some of those. So making sure that we're collecting all the revenue we should be. But I do feel that because we are in line, it's really the allocation between water and wastewater that I referred to kind of earlier. And our fixed rate probably kept our rates lower than we probably needed to. So we probably should have been higher. So I would have expected a rate increase based just solely on the amount of required for our fixed rates. But I would say, 6% recommended in water, for example, is right in line with the regional average. Our wastewater is probably the area that could use more analysis. We're also seeing larger deficits in the wastewater side. So that's where I would focus my attention, is the wastewater side.
Thanks. And you talk about the capital cost versus the variable cost. It quite shocks me that we didn't increase the capital cost over those many years when you look around and assets and the cost of all that was going up so much. To avoid that in the future, should we just set an inflation growth number against that every year, even if it's not discussed or no study or anything like that, so we don't run into this 20 years later again?
Chair Burgess, I would agree. I think the recommendation in the BMA report is to tie any percentage increase in the operating rate to the capital rate and do the same on the capital side, because it's a fair assumption that any costs incurred on the operating side would be required on the capital side. I've struggled with that as well, like that fixed rate. It would have been, I think, more obvious if we had better capital forecasting to realize that our capital plan that we were anticipating over the years, we didn't have the funding potentially to match that longer term capital plan. And it would have been more apparent that the $26 was not enough as our longer term capital needs were increasing. But I don't think we had that longer range forecasting ability before to really know that $26 wasn't sufficient to fund this.
And lastly, OREG 45307 talks about having a financial plan every 5 years. I assume we are delinquent in that. And is there any consequences from that, or what does that look like aside from us being behind in our billings?
Chair Burgess, so there's a lot of doom and gloom, I feel, in this report, but we do have a financial plan. We're not delinquent in that financial plan. It was done in-house because it is a requirement. It's an OREG requirement as part of the Safe Drinking Water Act. We have every year supplied that financial plan. Kind of, I think we should be updating it every year, but the last time we did it was in 2021 in-house with existing finance resources. We just did it to satisfy that OREG financial plan and not really doing a deep dive into our rates the way this study does. Just a note on that OREG financial plan. It's included in this study, the last couple pages of that. So that satisfies that requirement. I'm not asking council to endorse that because we just like to do a little bit more analysis. Because it was passed in 2021, we do have some time until 2026 before we need another one. So I'd just like to perform a little bit more analysis before we take that to council. It'll look very similar to this for endorsement and approval probably next year, but it would look very similar to this.
Thank you. Yeah, Director Poupé.
Thank you. And through you, Chair Burgess, just to council, I just wanted to be very clear about Councillor Bryant's question regarding the water and sewer. If you're in a community that only has water and no wastewater, you're not paying for wastewater. I want to be clear to the public on that one. So there isn't a subsidy. You're only funding that rate, that system that you use. So that just for clarity, if you have wastewater, it's municipal wastewater, you will fund both water and wastewater, right? But I just want to be very clear that in those communities you identified, there's no wastewater servicing, there is no wastewater charge, okay?
Seeing no more questions, there is a recommendation here that we receive the BMA water and wastewater rate study and direct staff to conduct additional financial analysis. Moved by Councilor Bryant and seconded by Councilor Cadeau. Any other discussion? All those in favor? And that's carried. All right, moving on to the next item here, we have Jared Poupé, the Director of Infrastructure Services, about a tender award for cured in place pipe sewer lateral lining.
Thank you, Chair Burgess, and through you to members of council. We're here to seek council's endorsement for tender award for the second phase in the I&I program in the area of St. Jacobs, Water and Yonge Street. This is a tender award for cured in place pipelining for the sewer lateral lining. The main line was done previously last year, and we're looking to, or actually, sorry, it was completed this year, and we're looking to carry on with the lateral lining. So the reason, just for council's benefit, why that's done in two, very specialized work in the lining world. So there are contractors that do mainline lining, and there are contractors that do sewer lateral lining. It doesn't seem that anybody does both, at least well. How's that? So in this instance, we are happy to award, seek to award to Liquefor Services. We're familiar with them. They are a sewer lateral lining contractor, and the cost award is around $570,000. We're also asking council to retain GEI consultants to do the contract administration and inspection services duty. This is a good news story. This is one of those situations where we need to spend money to save money. As council knows, I&I is a problem in Woolwich. We do very good job of flow monitoring, and we have been tracking our flow monitoring. We've been spending money in Breslau and now St. Jacobs. We are going to be turning our attention. I'll give you a little pre-budget insight. We are going to be showing some work and concerted effort in Elmira. That is our next hotspot. It is all related to treating clean water, which obviously is a cost to all the ratepayers that use those systems. So by doing lining programs, we are tightening up those systems and ensuring that we are only treating effluent. So that's the purpose of the program, and it has been very successful too. So I think with that, I'm just happy to answer any questions council may have. Oh, just of note too, I think that there was only two bidders, again, because of the specialized work. I think council is used to seeing more bidders on a lot of our capital programming, but that's again related to the specialized work here too. So both contracts that bid, you could see the prices reflected in probably their schedules, but you only have a small pool for which to do this work. So we're happy that Liquiforce is able to come here and that we are under budget in the overall 2024 capital program as detailed in this report. And that does include, I think we're close to about $120,000 or so of provisional and contingency dollars in there as well. So that is baked into there. So that could potentially be a little bit more savings. Appreciate that we also looked at the BMA reporting and our state of the rates. We are asking council to endorse this. This is the second phase and the most critical phase. So we are asking council to endorse this. And then obviously as part of that financial plan that Director Lynn spoke of, that we'll be looking at capital programming and how it relates to the BMA reporting and long-term sustainability in both water and sewer.
Thank you, Director. Any questions? Seeing none, would someone like to move the recommendation on the agenda? Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor? And all those opposed? And that's carried.
Thank you.
And moving on to the next item, we have Director Poupet here with us again for an increase in staffing request, Operations Project Supervisor.
Thank you, Chair Burgess, and 3 members of council. Carter McGuire is here, our Manager of Operations as well. Happy to entertain any questions and to present the report here. We are seeking another pre-budget approval for a full-time position, a Operations Project Supervisor, to help support the operations department. Is long overdue. This was a request that we had been on our plates to do for some time. This was talked actually with the previous council, just so this council is aware of this position. I think the report speaks very well to itself. I think the challenge is just to highlight some of those. There is no redundancy in Woolwich. We are looking to create sustainable environment with some redundancy. And I think that's evident through all of the departments. I don't want to speak just for us. I don't want to look at it like that. I think Director Lynn presented a report earlier tonight. It's the same issues. All the departments will be able to speak to the same things. We do contain a lot of information in the hands of a very small group. And when those members are either incapacitated or away, it does create quite a detriment to the organization as a whole. And I don't think that creates a very sustainable environment for the long term. We have managed over time, but I think those times are running thin. And as you can see with the growth and what the province has been initiating with respect to growth in Woolwich particularly, we are vastly under-resourced to meet that need. I think we have a lot of talented members in the township of Woolwich that work for us, and we are just seeking to supplement that resource and to more right-size the ship, so to speak. I think the report also is important to note that we've relying on 3 supervisors to do all the legislative requirements. These aren't Woolwich requirements. These are legislative requirements put on us by the province. These help protect ratepayers with respect to claims. When we receive those, we have legislated obligations to do road inspections throughout the year. We're relying on a contracted service to do that currently. But unfortunately, that is all that position is capable of doing. And then we have winter control obligations through the months of October into April. That puts an incredible strain on the 3 supervisors to do that work. And as you can see in the report details out, there's a number of issues that we struggle on as well. Engineering and operations have subsidized each other in the past. Engineering is doing a lot of work that we want operations to look after from a roads perspective, and we have just simply done that because there wasn't the resourcing available. So I think the report does speak to the challenges that we face in the department. They are real, and we are seeking council's endorsement. Very much appreciate the commentary this evening. Staff don't like coming in pre-budget approval either. It's not intentional. I want that to be apparent. It's not anything any of us like to do. We like to have all of this vetted at the time, and we are obviously going to have another good discussion coming into budget cycle for the 2025 budget. But again, I think this speaks really to the needs and to the struggles that we're all facing. So I think with that, Carter and I would be happy to try to entertain any questions you may have.
Councilor Schwint.
You indicated you've got some contracting help during some road patrol for the winter season. What's the opportunity to expand that contract to other individuals and get that service somewhat provided for this year through that means, and then we could have our normal budget process to look going forward?
Through Chair Burgess to Councillor Schwint. So right now that contracted service is only for the obligated road patrol, sort of the summer months, more or less. It doesn't take on any of the winter patrolling. The winter patrolling is only done by the 3 supervisors on a rotational basis. So it's really just a one little piece that part-time duty does. It doesn't really help us in the winter at all.
But could you get part-time help to do that winter period for a 6-month contract to be 1 in 4 or 2 in 5? So you're alleviating the overtime on your other 3 managers until we can get through the budget process and better understand where the entire township as a whole is going to lie financially.
Yeah, through Chair Burgess to Councillor Schwint. So I think the struggle that we have right now is time. Right now we're in the end of October, coming into Christmas. It's going to be difficult to onboard a part-time resource. We've had this before where we've tried to muddle along, quite frankly, with part-time resourcing. It becomes a challenge. I can tell you real world experience with the region of Waterloo. They used to part-time resource all of their winter control operations in the rural areas. That happened for many, many years. And it was recently, I believe a couple of years ago, they had nobody anymore. So they actually went to their council and were approved to have full-time resourcing. And then they obviously did other duties, just simply than winter control. I know that Clerk Smith does do some part-time work from a bylaw enforcement perspective to supplement. These are Band-Aids, quite frankly. I don't know that investment in this short period of time to get a Band-Aid to deal with council, the ask would be the same in come budget cycle for a full-time position. We'd have to think about that quite frankly, Councillor Schwint. But I don't know that it really moves our needle very much given the training that's required. It's not as simple as throwing somebody out at 2 a.m. and telling us, hey, are the conditions, reasonable to call in staff? It's a fairly important role to do, and there's a lot to consider when making those decisions as well. And then it's the other duties that still aren't being addressed through the reporting that we highlighted as well. So there was obviously the redundancy, the work-life balance, the help with the equitability on overtime, but it was all these other duties that still aren't happening. So it really doesn't address that issue. But it may, and I don't want to speak for Carter, maybe Carter should speak to this. I don't know if that's potentially more burdensome, and I hate to ever look a gift horse in the mouth. That's not what we're trying to do, but I think the full-time ask is overdue as far as staff are concerned.
Through Chair to Councillor Schwint, bringing on a part-time staff would be a high burden of training. We go through that when we bring on a new management staff. It takes time for that individual, even if they're familiar with some of the processes, to bring them online. So to bring in a part-time staff for just 1 season, if we were to bring them on now, we would have to still train them through different events, like different processes and different events we receive to be able to get proper response by our staff. I think there'd be, as Jared said, a lot of burden with bringing on a part-time staff for that short term. Regardless of who we bring in, there will be a transition of training period. But it would be of value to be able to put that in, that you train once and then you have that person trained for continued employment. That makes sense.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Chair, through you to the director and financial impacts. It's a similar question that I asked Director Lynn. But you have some information in there, some financial information speaking to some offsets. If we were to approve this, can you speak roughly to that? I think it's $70,000 split between two.
Thank you through Chair Burgess to Councillor Cadeau, and I apologize. My computer's frozen. I don't have access to the report, but off memory, thank you. But off memory, you're correct. There is two opportunities to reallocate funding. One is a conservative estimate based on a 3-year rolling average of overtime placed by the supervisors. That, I want to be clear, that is not eliminating the overtime requirements of the supervisors. It is reallocation of that overtime that they are doing that can feed to this position. So that's important to note too. But it will provide equitability across the board, and it is a savings that can be applied. And then the second piece is obviously the part-time position, and that the costs that have been associated with that would be rolled over into this full-time position. So I do believe it was around $69,000, just almost $70,000 available, which, depending on the scale, and we were clear to show council on our pay grid, from the low end, I think we were over 60% potential funding, and on the if it was a higher end, a higher potential, then I think we're still over 50%, around 56%, I believe the report spoke to. So that's a significant chunk that is being covered already. And obviously it would go a long way in providing some resiliency and some redundancy in the department.
Mayor Shantz.
Thank you through you to Director Coupe. So the bulk of this, when you're talking about the overtime and the savings and some of those pieces, is through the winter months. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair Burgess, to Mayor Shantz. No, it's actually throughout the year. The part-time contracted position is doing our road patrol per minimum maintenance standards more or less throughout the year. That's not the winter control patrol. That is a different patrol. Some of the overtime that we identified, though, is definitely a blend, but it's throughout the year. It does include some of the winter patrolling, obviously, but it also the overtime required throughout the year for some of the other road patrols too. So it is a year-round look at the savings, and hence why that full-time position would be picking up that part-time position, plus being able to account for some of the overtime being applied by the supervisors and be in the rotation for the winter patrol. They would not solely do the winter patrol. It would still be a rotational basis by all now 4 potential supervisors as opposed to 3.
And how long, like, would they be even trained for this winter?
Well, I think that's the real struggle. We don't know. Depends on who you get. And I think that's indicative of any time you go out to market, you don't know who's available. It really is a snapshot in time. Appreciate that comment because we recognize that as well. We are late here. Best case scenario, we onboarded somebody before December, but incredibly unlikely. They probably could come through maybe in the beginning of the year. We can certainly go through the training process and they would hit the ground running for next year, right? That would probably be more like it. I guess the other piece was if this was a deferral by council and we looked at the budget, we're probably not onboarding until May, June of next year by the time we get through budget cycle with typical approvals happening in March, right? So that's all we're looking to do is try to onboard somebody sooner than later. And just again, to remind council that this was talked about with the previous council, so it's been on our docket for some time, and it's been a need for some time as well.
Okay, same comment as previously. I'm not fond of pre-budget requests for something like this. This should be coming in the budget cycle and then working through it like that. So not that I don't necessarily think it's important or necessary, but I really would like to see the whole picture before I start making a whole bunch of approvals.
Thank you through you, Councillor Burgess, to Director Coupe. When we're talking about the onboarding and getting that staff on earlier, I'm assuming part of that is to coordinate with the construction season as well. That ideally, if we were to have this position hired in time for the new year, by the time you're done onboarding, they're kind of ready to kick off into that construction season. Whereas if we're waiting for after budget and that onboarding is maybe being completed May, June, we're kind of running into that and their effectiveness may be undercut in that scenario.
And through you, Chair Bird, just to Councillor Grant, I think the real crux of this is the help is needed now, so the sooner the better, quite frankly. I think there's to delay just continues in a bit of a tenuous position, I would say, in operations in general. So I think that's really the ask, is that we just think any opportunity to onboard sooner than later is better.
Thank you. And I certainly appreciate this has definitely been the theme of tonight, is that we are getting snapshots of our departments that are in critical need of staff and have been chronically overworked and undersupported. Why I agree that I'm not a fan of pre-budget decisions like this. I think that it's the outcome of us not taking on these harder discussions at a much earlier rate. So in that case, I'm fully supportive of this position and approving it now in the pre-budget process. I feel the same for finance and was disappointed to see that it was put aside. But yeah, that's to say that I think that we have a dire need within the township to address these gaps within the departments.
Councillor Godot.
I'll second that motion.
All right, so we got a motion on the floor here from the agenda. Any other discussion on it before we call the vote? Councillor Godot.
Thank you, through you to the director. In your report, you mentioned winter contract management, summer contract management. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to the struggles that you've seen with your current complement, especially in the summer. Let's focus on that, because I won't speak for the entire council. I'll speak for myself, but I fielded a lot of, emails from residents about things like tree removals, boulevard trees and things like that. So what is the daily struggle in trying to get to some of these things that this position would alleviate and make life better for residents?
Thank you, through Chair Burgess to Councillor Godot. I think I'm going to default to Manager of Operations, Kurt McGuire.
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. Typically now with our struggle, we're at the back end after a complaint comes in. We're not having the ability to have a staff on site to be continually going around checking through the progress of some of these summer contractors. The same is the same in the winter with, for example, our sidewalk snow plowing. We're only responding to complaints. We're not out there to actively see issues as they go. Typically, we're behind it by a couple weeks with our responses. So the hope would be to have this individual, this position, would be working hand in hand with those contracted services during the time of that program, so that we can catch some of those issues at the time that they're happening instead of coming through a complaint process.
Just to add, I think too, it's important, you've heard it said, you get what you inspect, not what you expect, right? So just having contracted services doesn't absolve the township of being engaged. I think that's very important. Contractors are paid, they are specialized in what they do, but it is only as good as they are managed as well. And that's not to slag contracted services by any means. It's just a fact that expectations, it's dollar value, right? That's what we're all about, is ensuring that we get a quality product and contractors get paid well. That's the important piece. It's all about quality for us and ensuring we get what we want. And that only comes through proper inspections. That's just, that's the nature of that. So I think that is the other part of this, is being reactive all the time doesn't set us up for success. It doesn't allow us to future plan. It doesn't, we eat claims, unfortunately, at times because of being so reactionary as opposed to being on top of certain things. So that's just the nature of what it is. And that's the risk really at the end of the day that we're facing with, and we're trying to mitigate as best we can with the resource.
Any last questions? Mayor Shantz?
Sorry, and I think this was covered off earlier. I've been in and out with my service. Just to get on the financial impact, it says it's fully contained in the existing infrastructure services, water and wastewater operating budget. So this is not a budget increase.
Through Chair Burgess to Mayor Schultz, that's not correct. There is at least 56% of this cost is contained within the budgets. And that depends. That could be as high as 60-some%, I think. But if we look at the higher end, so only a portion is contained, but more than 50% is contained already in the budgets. We would still be, it still would be a budget impact. It's likely to be a minor reduction
I
in the
see
water
that at the end
wastewater.
of the, I see that at the end of the section, the first part made it sound like it was contained, so. Okay, thanks.
All right, with that, I'll call this motion to question. All those in favor? And all those opposed? And that is defeated. Mayor Shantz?
Yeah, once again, I'd like to see this come back in the budget process.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our next item, we have Thomas Vanderhoff, Deputy Director of Recreation and Community Services, here to present the St. Jacobs Arena replacement of a bunch of equipment. Go ahead.
Sounds good. Through you to council. So tonight RCS has before you grant application St. Jacobs Arena rink floor, Dasherboards, glass and bleacher replacement. So the two recommendations that we have are support a grant funding application to the Canadian Sport and Recreation Infrastructure Fund in the amount of $2,466,677. That is with HST for the replacement of these assets, and direct staff to report back to council following announcement of the grant with a recommendation for 2025 or 2026 implementation. So a bit of background. Trying to keep it short and sweet. St. Jacobs was constructed in 1974 atop an existing outdoor rink slab, which we didn't realize until we started reviewing all the drawings and getting some history on the village of St. Jacobs. There was a major addition put on in 2008, followed by significant capital investment over the last 5 to 10 years. New parking lot, roof replacements, refrigeration equipment, and so on. So the concrete slab is cracked and heaving throughout on the floor. We've experienced underfloor refrigerant leaks as well too, with frequency just only to increase as the age of the assets is extended. The rink boards and glass are original to the facility, and bleachers as well. So the scope of work would include replacement of all of these assets, all of which have extended past their estimated useful life at 30 to 40 years. Bleacher replacements first appeared in the township's capital budget in 2010, Dasherboards and glass in 2012, and the rink slab replacement in 2021. However, they have just continued to be pushed off every year to the following year, if not further, due to competing priorities and also availability of funding as well. Staff have evaluated the existing facility, drawing on some of our neighbors, looking at new arena construction projects and the cost of those versus continuing to invest in the arena at St. Jacobs Arena. We also reviewed the Parks and Recreation Master Plan outcomes, which will be before council in a couple weeks in early November, which recommended that we that rink is essential to the community, and we just continue to invest in it. So scheduling, the grant funding announcement is pretty vague in 2024, 2025 winter, which does play a part in when this project is carried out and when we can come back to council with a more thorough recommendation on implementation, timing, and funding the project. We would not be able to award the project to be completed in 2025 any later than the end of January 2025, as it needs to occur through the summer months. So more likely, staff would plan for a 2026 implementation if we are successful in receiving the grant funding. It's a bit on the grant. It's a $200 million grant program, provides funding to municipalities specifically for sport and recreation facilities. One of the primary objectives is extending the lifespan of existing facilities, and funding would be available up to a maximum of $1 million for this project. And so we feel we're a good candidate. We'd like council support to move forward with the grant application. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions council may have.
Council? Councilor Cadeau?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, to Thomas. So the expectation would be matching grant, right? If we're applying for a 2.2, we would be putting up 1.2 and they would be matching up to $1 million. That's
So yeah, it would be up to $1 million that they would contribute max. So it's 50% to a maximum of $1 million that they would contribute. And we would be on the hook for the remaining 1.2. So 1.2 after the HST rebate.
Councilor Schmidt?
And where we think that 1.2 will come from?
So staff will return once we determine whether we're successful or not, and with a plan for financing the project. And if that means that that we need to defer some other projects to take care of this one, which has been on the forecast for a number of years, and it's needed. I think staff are supportive of that move.
Mayor Shantz?
Sorry, I missed that discussion, but I would move the recommendation. We really need, if it hasn't already been done, we really need other levels of government to step up and help us with some of these capital projects, and this would be a significant coup, I suppose. This would be a grant for us and would be important in making these renovations that, as Thomas said, have been put off for a while. So I move the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Would someone like to second that?
I'll second the recommendation. I feel when it comes to grant money, if you don't ask for it, then like, what are you doing? It's money that you should be applying for, and we can make a decision later on where that 1.2 comes from if we are successful.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilor Cadeau?
Thanks. Last budget cycle, we approved some money for the St. Jacobs Arena to replace the bathroom, but we did not replace the floor in the lobby. Would this cover a replacement of the floor in the lobby? Because this would extend the life of that arena. When we had that conversation before, we were a little concerned about what the life of this arena would be, and that's why we made that decision not to proceed with the floor. I'm wondering if that's a consideration that we should look at now.
Yeah, through you to Councillor Cadeau. So the major remaining piece is the kind of the assets that are in the rink area. I think if I recall the discussion correctly, the flooring in the lobby was a nice to have and would really kind of tie the rink up, as all of the assets really have been replaced at that facility. So it's something that staff are definitely still interested in. However, it was not included in our grant application. That being said, we are asking for the greatest amount being $1 million. So it's something that that staff could be prepared to discuss at a later time as well.
All right, seeing no other questions, call this one to vote. All those in favor? And that's carried. All right, thank you, Thomas. Moving on to other business. First up, mayor's reports on regional matters. Is there anything there?
I've got nothing more to add at this point.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Any council reports or updates from anyone? Seeing none, I will move on to the fireworks bylaws, and that is Clerk Smith, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So we've received this correspondence from the City of Kitchener. And what it's doing is it's asking other municipalities in the region to participate in a joint review of fireworks bylaws. Before we took any action on this, we wanted to see what council's appetite was for a joint review, make sure we had council support before we expended staff time. However, I can say that the fireworks bylaw has been on our radar to update as well. It's one of our older ones, and I think one that we get some questions about and could use some modernizing. So staff would definitely be supportive of this if council's okay with us participating in the review. On your agenda, I drafted a recommendation. If it helps, just that council direct staff to participate and contribute to the development of a unified approach with this review. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to Clerk Smith. I would fully support that, and pardon me, I would move your recommendation for you. I think we need a unified approach in the whole region instead of it being piecemeal. I look at what happened in Guelph, and they've basically banned fireworks because people just are not following the rules, and they're making it very difficult for their neighbors. So I would fully support doing a unified approach.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I would also second this report or motion. I feel that with the two-tiered system, part of the struggle is the lack of clarity between City of Kitchener, City Waterloo, Wilmot, North Dumfries, whatever you may be in, that cross-boundary kind of differing bylaws could make this quite difficult. So I think we needed a unified bylaw for fireworks bylaw for quite some time. And I think that our outdated fireworks bylaw has been in need of some addressing as well.
Councillor Schwinn.
Just for Clerk Smith, how many complaints or issues have we dealt with in the last 1, 2, 3 years? Estimate.
Oh, off the top of my head, I couldn't answer that, but I could get that information for you.
Yeah, I guess the point I was going to make was if we're having complaints and issues in our township, I'd support working with other ones. If we're not having complaints and issues, maybe this is one we just sit out and copy afterwards because we're not having problems. That's why I'm lacking information before deciding. I'm not opposed to revamping the bylaw at the time, but if we're not having problems, we're trying to save money tonight. That was the theme of the night, so why push it?
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Just to comment for Councillor Schwint, I've heard from a number of people that are not happy with what they're seeing in some of the areas in our municipality. I'm not going to name places, but there have been some issues.
I can maybe speak anecdotally as well, that there have been many nights where it's been 2 a.m. and I've been hearing fireworks going off. So the complaints may not be happening on an official capacity, but there are problems when it comes to our fireworks.
That helps put it in context. In North Woolwich, we don't have the issue.
And just to add, so really quickly, I just lost the number, 26 complaints in the last, since 2019. Real quick look, having said that, I think some of our noise complaints are related to fireworks as well. So I think I would have to do a little bit more digging to actually get the exact number for you. I could say at least 26.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you to Clerk Smith. I don't know if contextually too, if we would be able to get this number, but I wouldn't be surprised given the late night fireworks going off, that if some of those complaints are being redirected to the police non-emergency line and whether that's being reported to us in turn. So that metric may actually be off, whether it's from a lack of understanding within residents on who they should be calling to make that report. But I would not be surprised if we're seeing a lot of those complaints being missed because it's going to the police non-emergency.
Councillor Cadeau.
I know it's not good to speculate, but I'll speculate here. For every one complaint that we get coming in, there's probably 50 other residents in that neighborhood that also have concerns, but just haven't voiced them. So that's what I would speculate.
All right, so there is a recommendation here. Actually, it was already moved, wasn't it, Clerk Smith? Yes, so all those in favor? And all those opposed? And that is then carried. All right. Any discussion from outstanding activity lists from council? Seeing none, we have no notice of motions. We do have a bylaw resolution here. Motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read first, second, third time, and finally passed. That they be numbered bylaws number 65, 2024 to 68, 2024. And that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. And you can see the 4 of those on your agenda. Would someone like to move those? Moved by Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? And that's carried. All right. That brings us to the end here, but council was not able to finish all of the items from our closed session earlier. So we will pass a resolution to enter back into close and will adjourn immediately after. All right. Deanne, Director Freeze.
Sorry, I just did want to provide a update to council in open session that we have had to delay our official plan. We were originally planning to go out for a public meeting or an open house on October 28th and then bring it to a statutory public meeting November. Yeah, due to some delays in hiring the new manager, as well as some information that we were waiting for, like the new provincial policy statement that just came out for 2024, and some updated information on the proclamation of Bill 23. So we are planning on delaying that until 2025, hopefully first quarter.
Thank you for that update. Did anyone have questions or comments on that? All right, thank you, Ms. Freeze. So yeah, we didn't finish all our closed items from earlier, so we are going to make a motion on that. But before we make that motion, council would like to thank all those who participated, attended, or tuned in to the council meeting, and we wish you a good night. The resolution to go back into close is as follows: that the council of the Township of Woolwich convenes in closed session on Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. Immediately following adjournment of the open session in accordance with section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 for the purpose of considering the following agenda. We still have 1 personal matter to discuss and 2 property matters. Can I have a mover and a seconder? We have Councillor Bryant and Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? And that's carried. All right, Meet, can you please stop the live stream now and place council into a breakout room?